Introduced in Unreal Engine 4.20, we can now have scripted extensions for actor and content browser context menu. Okay, what does that mean? Basically, we have the ability to right-click on items in our content browser and call custom functions. So I can right-click and call scripted actions, or we could right-click on something in our scene and have the same thing. This is using the Blutility function inside of the engine. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. First thing, it uses Blutility. We need to make sure it's turned on. By default, it's not. You can go into your editor preferences. I find it easier just to search for Blutility. It's basically Blueprint utility combined. It's under experimental tools. You can enable it, editor utility blueprints, and we'll check it. And this basically allows it to work. Second of all, you need special assets in order for this to actually work. You can't go up to Blueprint and it's going to be the asset utility or the actor utility. You cannot create blueprints this way. So we'll create one, for example, and expect it to work. Unfortunately, it has to be a Blutility created blueprint to work. So if we were to use this, once you set up everything, you'll find it simply doesn't work. So let's delete that. And what you actually want is a blueprint Blutility. This will give you the items you can subclass from. An actor action is something that can be done inside of our level. I can right click on a mesh, for example, or a character or a camera, and something could happen. An asset action is inside of our content browser. I can click on something like a material or an actor or a mesh inside of the content browser, something we haven't actually created in our scene, and do something with it. Now I've created two of them for my examples here. I have my actor action utility and my asset action utility. Now my actor action utility is already opened and set up right here. I'm going to open up my asset action utility, and you're going to find an issue. For whatever reason, right now, as of 4.20, if you double click to open, they simply show that blank screen. You actually need to right click and edit blueprint, and this is going to open up your actual blueprint window. So let's look at one of these. Depending on if you're using the actor or the asset, you have the ability to get the selected actors or the assets. So for example, we could do get assets, selected, and we have get selected assets. And this will give me either, if I'm using an actor, the actors, or if I'm using the asset, the assets. So you want to make sure you use the appropriate one. You can't get the selected assets if you're using an actor utility because they aren't assets. They're actors. Just something to note. And then you can do something with them. In this case, I'm looping through them. I'm going to cast to my static mesh actor because I only want to work on the static mesh actors. I'm creating a copy for the undo buffer. I'll show you what that is in a second. And I'm setting the material on it to whatever material I want. Now there's a couple things here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this and unhook this up for now. And we're going to set this to the default material because that is technically what we called this. So what I'm doing is basically any actors I have selected in my scene, I want them to now be the default material. We can go over here, and let's say I select these two, for example, that are red, and we'll select that one. I'll right-click, scripted actions, set default, and now you'll see they now have the default material. Now the note I added here, create copy for undo buffer, having the object I'm selecting, that allows me to now undo. So I could undo, and it goes back to what it was. You'll see undo Blutility. If you didn't have that hooked up, let's just skip it, for example, and we'll go ahead and run this again. We will set default material. Now if I go to undo, well, it's not going to work. That's kind of the problem. So if you're going to do something that is a actual change, try to make sure you use the create copy for undo buffer. And there's a bunch more nodes in there. They're under the development section, under editor, and you'll find a bunch of different nodes that you can use and stuff you can work on. Now the other nice thing is, well, first of all, I kind of jumped past the first part. I assumed you'd used Blutilities before. If you haven't, when you have a function or a event, you have to click on the event name or the function name and make sure call an editor is enabled. This is what allows it to work on that menu, or it works as a Blutility. So if I go back here and we look now, you'll see call my default function is no longer working. Let's go ahead and turn that back on and compile. And now set default material is back. Now another thing, we have the ability to set inputs. So this is what I had set up before. So we'll call this one the new material. And what this does is any inputs will be basically pass along into this function, and it's going to pop it up and allow you to set those when you start it. So I hooked it up for a new material as an input, and I hooked it up here as my set material. We'll now run this again. Let's go ahead and select these three, and we'll do scripted actions, set default material. I just didn't rename it, but you'll notice now it pops up and asks me what the new material is. Let's go with the gold material and hit OK, and there you go. Now I've set those to gold. Being able to script your Blutilities, these editor actions allow you to make editor functions that you can use to quickly speed up development. You could have some pre-done Blutilities you can share, for example. Maybe you have like default mockups for something that's supposed to be of certain material types. You're going to do things, actually that's probably a good one. You could set the default physics material on multiple objects easily inside of the editor without having to fumble around where it's at. Maybe you want all your walls to be default type. You could just do that, scripted actions, and there you go. Something to note. The asset ones work the same way. Again, just get selected assets, and it's going to work on anything inside of here. Now you'll notice something. If I right click on, let's say this character, I don't have the option. If I right click on some material, I do have the option. Why is that? Both of these support an override function called getSupportedClass. By default, getSupportedClass, so here's my action one, for example, is going to return back anything. So for example, in this one here, if I wanted to, let's say, right click on my character, I'd be able to set his default material to whatever I want, but that's kind of weird. It's not even going to work, considering I have another setup in here to only do static mesh actors. Let's say you didn't want to cast. Let's say you want to restrict it. Just override. We can go in here. We can tell it, okay, I want this to be my static mesh and actor, and now only static mesh actors are going to be supported by the right-click menu. Right-click, scripted actions. Right-click, none. Right-click, nope, because those are not static mesh actors, therefore they're not supported. And that's why when I right-clicked on the material here, it worked, because my override is only returning materials. And that's it. That's a quick overview for the scripted extensions for Actor and Content Browser. Check out the documentation for more information. They're really handy and useful for automating things that you used to do by hand, and you can now do it automatically.